Hello friends, welcome to this module on using multithreading for networking. In the last module, we had seen how to use server socket classes to build a network based application, network based server. We had created a simple eco server. In this module, we will be looking at how do we create a multi-threaded server. Fine. In the last module, what we had seen was we had demonstrated a simple network server which was able to accept multiple connections from clients, but it was able to handle those connections one by one at a time. It could not handle them simultaneously. In this module, we look at multithreading. We use multithreading to handle multiple client connections parallelly. Fine. So, let us start by understanding what is a thread. So, what is a thread? A thread is a sequence of execution. Fine. When the JVM starts, the first thing it does is it starts the execution of main method in a thread called main, but main is not the only thread available in the JVM. There are other threads also executing in parallel. For example, for the purpose of garbage collection, we have a garbage collector thread which is also working independent of the main threads. It is working in parallel. Fine. The main okay. So, how do we create a new thread of execution? The idea here is to be able to create a new thread of execution. When we write a network based application, a network based server, we would like to be able to create a separate thread of execution to handle each client connection. So, we would be demonstrating here how to write a simple before that, let us understand how do we create a new thread of execution. What are the steps for creating a new thread of execution? Fine. To create a new thread of execution, we would need to be defining some class which, let us look at how do we create a new thread of execution. In order to create a new thread of execution, we would first need to have a class which defines the task to be carried out. The task to be carried out is defined by a non-abstract class which implements the run method of a runable. This run method of the runable is nothing but the task which will be carried out by a separate thread of execution in parallel. Okay. So, to have this, so the first step to be done would be to create an instance of a class which implements the runable interface. The second step would be to create the object of thread using this runable which we created in the earlier step, and then we set up the properties on the thread object. This step about setting up the properties is not compulsory, since we may go with the default initial values of those properties. Fine, we may not like to change them. And then the final step, the fourth step here, is to call the start method on the thread object. When we call the start method on the thread object, that is where the new thread of execution would be created. It would start in a new runtime stack where the thread of execution is then started. Okay. So, here in this module we will be demonstrating the same eco server which we had developed earlier in the previous module, but in this case what we would like to do is we would like to use multithreading and to handle each client connection. What will be the way we will be developing here is we will have a class called eco server, okay, whose main job would be to accept connection from a client whenever any new client connects. In order to handle the client, no, the main thread is not going to handle the client, it is going to create a new thread of execution which can handle that client and so it will be in a while true kind of a loop, just looking for connections, wait for a connection. When a connection comes, it would just simply create a new thread of execution to handle that connection, and then and so that will be one part, and the second part would be to have the handling part. How do we handle, what is the task to be carried out in that separate thread of execution? So, we will have a separate class called equer, which is just used for handling one client. Okay. So, let us begin with the demo here. Fine. So, let us develop this, let us start by developing the echo server class first. Fine. We will declare the package org.epg pathshala.dad.net. Okay. We will need to use the classes from the socket, the server socket classes, and some of the things from the java.io package. Let us use the import statements, import java.net.server socket, import java.net.socket, import java.io exception. We have exceptions. Fine. Okay. And then let us have the class definition. So, we have the public class echo server. Okay. And this would be using those server socket and the socket classes. So, we have the private variables server socket, fine, let us call it as the board. We will have a private variable for socket, which is like the phone. Okay. And so, now let us have a constructor. So, we have a public constructor for echo server, which would take a port number as a parameter. So, we can start this echo server on any port, right. So, yeah, so we have this echo server constructor, which fine. So, when someone creates an instance of echo server, he gives a port number, and what we do here is we will use this to initialize our server socket object. So, this dot board equals new server socket, fine, and specify whatever port number is specified, that we are using here. Okay. So, that is one, fine. Now, we will now what we are going to do here is we are going to this echo server is going to be looking for going to be going in a it is going in a while true loop, fine, where it waits for a client to connect, and whenever some client connects, it has to carry out those 4 steps, those steps for creating a new thread of execution. So, for that let us put this, we have let us have a method, let us call the method name as run. This has nothing to do with the run method of runable, this is not runable here, okay, but we can have a throws here, throws IO exception. Okay. So, we have throws IO exception, and in the run method we have a while true loop, right. So, it is a while true loop which says okay, first step it is waiting for a client to connect. So, it says okay, when a client connects, so it is waiting for a client to connect by using the accept method. So, this dot phone equal this dot board dot accept, fine. So, fine, calling the accept method to wait for a client to connect. Next, create the instance of runable. Okay, here we are thinking of developing a class called equer, which will be implementing the runable interface. So, we can have a runable r equals new, we will have a class called echoer. Fine, let us call that class as echoer. Okay. But when that echoer is created, we are going to pass, we would like to give it the socket object. So, that this is the socket to be handled. Okay. So, we pass this dot the socket object as a parameter. Fine. That phone is nothing but our socket object. Socket is like a phone. Okay. So, fine, and then we have the next step is to create the object of thread. Okay. So, we create object of thread using the object of runnable. So, we will say okay, new thread and pass the runnable as a parameter, and okay, we have the optional step of to set up the properties for the thread object. So, we may skip that thread step and we can just straight away go for calling the start method. So, we can start the thread. Fine. So, yeah, so this is what we have as a while true loop. Fine. It is just start. So, in this what is happening is we are first step is waiting for a client to connect. Fine. Once the client has connected, next is we are having the creation of runnable object, which here in our case is the echoer object, and then we have the creation of thread using our runnable, and we call the start method, and then go back in the while loop to look for the next connection. So, we do not actually wait to handle we do not handle the client here. Handling of client is going to be done in a separate class. Okay, we can write a main method here. What we write in the main method? So, let us have the main method for our echo server. Okay, so, we have public static void main, fine, with string array. Fine, this can have throws. Okay, so, this has throws IOException, and in this we simply have to create first thing is let us take command line argument. So, we have the port number coming from as a command line argument. So, we will say okay, so port is equal to integer dot parse int args of 0. So, what is the first command line argument? That is taken as a port number on which the user wants to start the echo server. Fine. So, we have port number, okay, and now we create the object of echoer. Fine. So, we have echo server. So, we create the object of echo server, that is our server equals new echo server, and parameter is the port number. Fine. So, this will be able to reserve the port and start listening for connections, and then we call the run method on server. Okay. So, that is what we have for the echo server class. Fine. So, let us save this. Okay. So, this is org epg pathshala dad.net, that is a package. So, let us save accordingly. Fine. So, we have okay. Fine. So, we have the epg pathshala src folder where we have the folder for the packages, okay, and let us save this as echo server.java. Right. So, that is the echo server we have. Fine. Now, here in this echo server we have used a class called echoer, fine, which is nothing but our runnable object. Okay. So, fine. So, next step we will create another class called echoer. So, let us develop that class called echoer. Okay. So, for our echoer we will again have the same package. Let me copy it from the earlier place, and we can copy those imports. Okay. Here over and above we do not need the server socket in our eCore class, it is just mainly going to handle the socket, right, but we will also need here we are reading from the input stream and out and writing to an output stream. So, we will need the input stream, import for the input stream and the output stream. Okay, so let us fine. Now, this will be the class which implements runnable. So, we have this as a public class called eCore which implements runnable, fine, it implements runnable and therefore, we will have the method called run. Okay. So, we have okay. What does this eCore require? This eCore requires a socket object, fine. Okay. So, it has a socket and that is like the phone, socket is like a phone. It will use a input stream which it gets from the socket. Okay. Input stream is nothing but it is something like a receiver. Okay. We have another variable for output stream which is like the transmitter. Okay. And then let us go for the constructor for eCore. So, yeah, recollect in the earlier class what we have done is we have used in the constructor we have passed socket as a parameter. So, we have the public constructor for eCore which takes a socket as a parameter. Okay. Fine, we can keep the throws IO exception here, fine. Okay, when we fine. So, here what is being done? Fine, we assign it to the socket object, one is the assignment, but then we also initialize our transmitter and the receiver part. So, this is this dot receiver equals this we can get from input stream. So, we have the get input stream method in the socket, recollect, okay, and then we have the transmitter equals s dot get output stream. Okay. Fine. So, that is a constructor part and now next we will have is a it's implementing the run method. So, we have the public void run method. Okay. This run cannot have a throws because this is an overriding method, fine. We can specify that by saying @override. Okay, let us put that override. It is a overriding method. It is overriding the run method of the runnable interface. Okay. So, this can't have any new throws. Okay. We can't put a throws IO exception over here. We will need the try catch for that. Okay. So, now the first thing what should be what is being done by the eCore? It is just reading all the things from it is reading the input whatever is coming from the client and whatever comes from the client send it back to the client. So, for that let us write the code. So, it would look like this. Yes, we need the try catch block here. Okay. Fine, we will need the try catch. We can't put throws here. So, we have to put the try catch for IO exception. Fine. So, we have the catch IO exception IOE and okay. Fine. So, if we catch we will just print the stack trace. Fine. So, within this yes within the try catch within the try block what is being done is where first thing is we are waiting for the input from client. So, whatever is input from client we will need to read it from the receiver. So, that can be captured as int, it is reading a single byte equals this dot receiver dot read, fine. So, that reads the first byte, and then we have a while loop while there is not end of file. So, this will have this whatever input is received will get a -1 whenever there is a when the connection is closed from the client. So, we will say while that byte is not equal to -1, okay, whatever we have received we would like to write it back, but before we send it back we would like to show it locally. So, we have system dot out dot print, we won't use print ln here, be careful about not using print ln, otherwise every character comes on a different line. Okay. So, what do we print? The character which we have received. So, we need to cast as character. Okay. Fine. So, print this, send it back to the client by using this dot transmitter dot write the byte back to the client and read the next byte. So, this is B equals this dot receiver dot read, fine. So, that is the while true loop we have. Okay. Fine. So, this is the code for the echo. So, that is a simple way of creating a echo server, fine. But what is different about this echo server is from the earlier one. In the earlier case, in the previous module, what was done was we had a while loop which would wait for a client to connect, fine, and it would handle that client there itself and then go for the waiting for the next client. Here we have broken into two parts. There is a echo server part which is creating each which is waiting for the client to connect, fine, and whenever a client connect it creates a separate thread of execution where the client handling is done. So, this particular class is about how a client is going to be handled. Okay. So, let us save this as echoer. So, we have to save this as echoer.java, okay, and then we can compile this. Okay. So, let us compile. src, fine. To compile we can use java c -d /bin, and let us compile the echo server.java. Okay. Fine. We need that exception to be declared in the constructor for echo server, fine. So, go back to that echo server. Fine. The constructor here, okay, needs a throws IO exception. Okay, save this. Okay, let us compile now. Fine. So, this compiles. Now, if we run this code, okay, okay. To run this code, we will need to specify the port number on which we would like to listen for connection, fine. Up to 1023, those ports are privileged ports. So, let us use some higher port, let us say we use 1024 as a port number, fine. So, that is fine. So, now what we have done is we have started a echo server, fine, which is waiting for clients to connect. Now, as a client, what we can do is we can open up a new terminal, fine, where we can start, we can use telnet as a simple TCP client. So, let us use telnet and here it is a, in this case it is a local host, but whatever is the IP address wherever your machine is, that could have been specified, and we specify port number as 1024. Okay, that is a port on which our echo server is listening. So, we connect this, yes, it got connected to that server, and now if we type anything, fine, we see that it goes to the server, fine, and it comes back from the server, fine. So, it is coming again. So, whatever we key in, that is going to be. So, this is hello from client 1, okay, hello client 1, okay, that goes, comes back, fine, it is going to the server here and coming back. We can open, we can check whether we can have multiple clients working simultaneously, let us see that. So, we open one more terminal and we do telnet again, telnet localhost, fine, okay. So, this guy also says hello and that shows on the server, and this will say okay, hello from client 2. Okay. So, when we say hello from client 2, yeah, that is from client 2, we can go back to the client 1's window and we will say hello again from 1. Okay. So, yeah, both are working, right. So, we can have multiple clients working simultaneously, fine. Okay. Fine. So, this demonstrates how we to develop a multi-threaded network based server, fine. We have just used a very simple server. In our server, we have our runnable, that is the place, the runnable is the one who knows how to handle one client. The way runnable has been, the run method has been written, yes, it could be different because you are developing a different kind of a network server. So, only thing what can change here probably is the code for the run method, that would be different because you have a different thing, you have different way of handling a client in a different kind of a server, fine. So, so this is for the demo part. So, in this module we have seen how to create a network server which is multi-threaded. It can handle multiple clients simultaneously, but there is one flaw in this. If we have too many clients coming simultaneously, how do we handle them? Fine. So, yes, there is some solution to that. There is some better API. There is just using the raw mode of Java. Java offers us how to create multiple threads, but there are much better API available within Java added from Java 5, which is related to concurrency. So, in the next module, we will be talking and looking at, we will have a demonstration of how to use that concurrency API for creating our network application, network based servers, fine. So, with that we will conclude here, thank you, conclude here, thank you, conclude here, thank you, conclude here, thank you, conclude here.